Torah Obscura Radio Hour, Season 2, Proceedings of the Academy of the Dream Society, by Michael Diamond. Chapter 12, Dream Society Detours. When you turned down the offer they thought you couldn't refuse, when the keys to the erstwhile kingdom slipped through your fingers, you gotta expect to end up in a lesser palace, caught in a time eddy at the edge of the interworld lagoon. A shabby palace where the heuristic is more sharp-edged, the didactics downright brutal. Such a detour is by its nature a purgation. There are many less traveled roads that call to the wandering novice. That's how I, during a particularly misspent episode of youth, though in pursuit of the Dream Society unawares, landed in the Ghost Palace, first among digressions at the edge of the waking world, at the opposite end of the trajectory of the weird from the ghost burial. How do we know what we know, and how do we know that we know it? I was possessed, and sure as hell didn't know it. There's a lot of ways this story could go. When you're lost, the first thing you want to do is grab hold of a map, locate yourself. Trouble was, I didn't know I was lost, and I certainly didn't have a damn map. Sun Samao had a map. My father had a map. The ancestors had a map. But I didn't. Why I spent the better part of 20 years trudging through the wilderness, the proverbial dark wood. Closer to the beginning rather than the middle of my life's journey, but they didn't live much past 40 in Dante's day. I think my descent into the ghost world started in earnest when I was 17. I spent that summer abiding in the Ghost Palace down the Jersey Shore. That wasn't the actual name of the flop house where I crashed for the summer, but that's what Sun Samao called it. My introduction to the ghost way. Finger to the philtrum, what happens in the Ghost Palace stays. You know the drill. The dark angel makes its mark above the upper lip, and the soul is whooshed into a world of sinister susurration. A secret sociopathic society of lifeguards, thieves, and grocery clerks, all sticking it to the man, whoever he was. I figure the ectoplasmic transfer happened shortly before my roommate stole my entire summer's earnings from under my mattress, a sure sign of the downturn my path had taken. Fucker must have thought I was the man. But his karma card was up when he got busted a few weeks later for robbing a local liquor store at gunpoint. He was a tanned and tawny-haired lifeguard for the town beach, as were so many of my other Ghost World confederates. I would eventually count myself lucky in retrospect in the transgressions of my even younger self, yes, younger than 17. Simple, albeit painful karma comeuppance sufficed for that previous go-round. So many years later that it would not yet have pinged my radar as a teen, though I had already undergone the tribal ritual of assumption into manhood. This time I picked up a hitchhiker, what my tribe calls a dibbick, from the ancient tongue meaning to cleave. The root word, devek, more typically connotes devotion, one who cleaves closely unto the laws on the books. In this case, a grotesque inversion of spiritual fervor. I suspect the hitchhiker leapfrogged from my armed and dangerous roommate to me. Who knows? I thought I knew what was what. Just a summer of good old degenerate fun. I had two more or less actual friends that summer. Their real names, I kid you not, were Jamie Christ and Todd Faust. Dream Society monikers, if ever there were. Jamie was a high school poker buddy and former co-captain with me of our junior high undefeated, unscored-upon weight football team. You know, the little guys. I, however, left athletics behind once we got to high school so as to pursue the life of suburban bohemiana. That might be why his mother never cottoned to me. Or maybe she wasn't wild about members of the tribe. Dunno. Whatever the case, I did not merit a single invitation to dinner at their beachside dasha that long reprobate summer, in spite of living in a dingy dive an easy thumb's ride away. I'm not really complaining. Jamie and I had our fun, water skiing off his boat, listening stoned to fire sign theater, and heading into the night for inebriatory adventure. We initiated our outings with a ritual downing of a bottle of Andre's Cold Duck, one apiece. Conquistadors, we'd bellow as we sashayed into the night. I'm not bragging, not some AA drunkalogue, just painting a picture of the waters in which I swam after checking into the Ghost Palace. There was one night that Jamie and I completed our carousing at the far end of the island, 2 or 3 a.m., and not a whiff of thumb mojo. So we did the obvious thing, lay down in the middle of the main drag and fell asleep. The angel of death was sorely tempted. Luckily, an angel of mercy, an affiliate of the Dream Society, in the guise of a local town cop, pulled his cruiser athwart our landing pad, got out, and proceeded to school us as to our manifest idiocy. "You boys fixin' to be roadkill?" he says, standing beside his vehicle, lights blinking in rhythm with our breaths. I don't recall that either one of us was able to muster a response as we shambled dazed to our feet. "Get in the back," he motions. "I'll drop you home. You're lucky I got here first, before some Speedy Gonzales ran your asses over. Don't have the sense God gave you." So, Mr. Kindly Police Officer dropped us each at our respective abodes. "Thanks, officer," we surely mumbled, before fading to black. Todd was another story. He was also a courtier in the Ghost Palace, along with his beefy buddy from the same North Jersey prep school for wayward rich boys. Seemed like a good dude, a bit spacey, that faraway look of someone who's done one too many tabs of acid. His friends dubbed him Bart Regular, well-coiffed do and trimmed mustache. He dragged me out on evening rounds with his fellow lifeguards, confreres, and co-conspirators. Seems I had been dropped into the midst of a vast youth underworld of debauchery and cupidity. But no fox or cat had led me to this pleasure island. It was my own father. My parents, already separated the whole past year, presented me with my summer plans as a fait accompli. Pack your bags and get your ass in the car with your father. No questions asked. Through the retrospectoscope, I can only figure my mother wasn't crazy about spending a summer alone with her angry teenage son in the empty family home. Later, she claimed it was for my own good. Maybe it was. My twin sister had already been sent packing to outer orbit or some other institution of nominal reform in the Poconos. Canadensis, the made-up Latin genitive of the noun Canada. Iroquois for village, what it took to collar red. So my alienated father, he who laughs last but laughs not, obliged my mother, she who binds things together but binds not, and trucked me off to the beach. As soon as we crossed the causeway to Ship Bottom, he pulls over to the first boarding house with a vacancy sign in the window, the Limerick House. Got a room from the 2 little old Irish ladies who ran the joint. "You be an Irish lad?" Not likely. Hop back in the car with my old man, who still has the motor running, and head down the main drag. Stop at the first store with a help wanted sign in the window, the mannequin. Sign on for the job with the manager with the walrus mustache and platform shoes. Hop back in my old man's car, careen up to the Ghost Palace, dropped off unceremoniously at the curb without so much as a "watch your ass, see you later." So it begins. Shortly after arrival, I am initiated into the rarefied art of the drinking game Thumper. I gaze in awe at the circle of zombies, Vikings, and burnt-out acid freaks at the table, all thumping, gesticulating, and vocalizing, like patients in a movement disorder clinic in a VA neurology ward. The evening's call and response inevitably results in the entire crowd becoming utterly shit-faced. "What's the name of the game?" "Thumper!" "How do we play it?" "We thump!" Big fun. I soon enough find there's a darker side to the fun crowd. One workday, whilst I was manning my post at the mannequin, Todd comes in unannounced with a couple of other lifeguard buddies. One of them was clearly in charge, the little blond guy with the waxed and curled stash and the malevolent glint in his eyes. Cat or fox, I'm not sure. Probably a hybrid. He smirks and informs me, "We're here to try on some pants, man." I soon realize that they would all be trying on pants and walking out with an unpurchased pair concealed beneath their baggy outer jeans. Mission accomplished, grinning like badgers, they made for the door. I don't recall having a particularly strong moral reaction to this turn of events, nor any sense of choice in the matter. The ghost palace was already nibbling around the edge of my purchase on reality. All in a day's fun, nobody the wiser, right? I can feel the grip in my chest as I recount the episode now, but not so sure I felt it then. Moral anesthesia. I thank God, truly, I wasn't present for any of the cruder sexual adventures of Mustache Man that I heard about from the other Ohms. The one other bit of larceny I recall clearly was a jaunt to the local grocery store with a couple of Limerick House inmates. Again, I didn't know the drill, but was soon to be disabused of my ignorance. We strolled into the place like we owned it. The gatekeepers to the comestibles on every shelf are teenage girls completely in the thrall of the League of Unscrupulous Lifeguards, a subcontractor or subsidiary to the Dream Society, for their shadier doings. The fellows waltz, sashay, and pirouette down the aisles, grabbing items at will off the shelves. Each pick terminates in a jump shot or casual backward toss into the grocery carts. Steaks, potatoes, onions, cereal boxes, milk carton, chips, salsa, loaves of sliced bread, heads of iceberg lettuce, tomatoes, jars of pickles, cans of tuna, jumbo mayonnaise jar, bottles of several varieties of carbonated beverage, and, of course, a case of toothpicks. I don't remember choosing much of anything myself, merely gawking as the naive initiate into those profane mysteries. As the caravan of soon-to-be ill-gotten goods approaches the checkout, the boys spot their two female confederates poised at the ready behind their respective cash registers. With nothing more than the exchange of mirthful glances and feigned pleasantries, each item passes beneath the painted fingers of the checkout clerks who plunk in their discounted value on the cash register. T-bone steaks, 50 cents each. "Quite the bargain, sir. Excellent choice." And so the patter goes as each item is checked out for random sums of pennies apiece. The total couldn't have even reached $10 max. Sticking it to the man. I don't recall the feast, only the purloining of its ingredients. I'm pretty sure I know the day the Dybbuk first dug its talons into me, and I've got a theory about why. I had always felt this vague sense of guilt for having garnered the lion's share of my mother's affection. My twin sister, Red was what we called her on account of her fire engine red hair, which sprouted in abundance from every part of her body, was shit out of luck. To be fair to my folks, she was probably the original ADHD kid, loud and impulsive to the point of being totally unmanageable. Even my father, usually the soul of patience with Red, once called her a wild ass of a girl. That was after an especially harebrained stunt that landed Red in the local ER, where she was once again ID'd as a repeat offender. But that still didn't excuse the way my mother set her up to get me the keys to Pop's new Firebird. We had two of them, two brand spanking new Firebirds. Pop paid cash on the barrel, proudly drove his to work every day, kept it spit and polish. It was his fervent desire to reward Red with the keys to the other Firebird if she could only manage to keep her shit together for a whole month. Why her? Just because she was technically the older of we two twins, first to split the womb. Not one ER visit, not one after-school detention, not one phone call from another irate parent or shopkeeper. At 16, that was a tall order for Red. To tell the truth, Red and I had pretty similar attitudes toward authority, uppity smart-ass members of the tribe. Only, as Red once put it to me after she got caught cheating on an exam for the umpteenth time, "Jakey, you know you're just as much of a deviant as I am, only you're slick enough not to get caught." Red was right. I took delicious pleasure in showing up the more venal and abusive teachers who couldn't do a damn thing because I always managed to stay just this side of the rules. It still tickles me to think about my spur-of-the-moment tromping of Finchley Goodfellow, our perennially snide American history teacher who never met a student he didn't hate. It was a glorious event when Goodfellow made the mistake of poking his head into the computer lab after school, where I was busy running code on paper tapes through our school's remote terminal, ancient tech. "Isakson, what are you doing here?" he sneers, surprised to see that I was interested in doing anything other than causing trouble in class. "This is my big chance." "Mr. Goodfellow, take a look at this," I call out, reeling him in for the kill. He draws closer, looks over my shoulder at the paper printout that shows the commands I type and the computer's response. What Mr. Goodfellow doesn't know, but every fledgling Fortran 4 programmer does, is that the system only recognizes the first three letters of any command. The command to sign off is either bye, B-Y-E, or goodbye. As the self-satisfied fop hovers over me, I exploit the serendipitous overlap of the first three letters of his name with the sign-off command. I type, "Goodfellow is a nasty person. If true, shut off." The machine obediently clicks and whirs, and after a brief pause, spits out, "Off at 4:45 p.m. Goodfellow is gobsmacked. He rips the paper from the printer and, with a great show of indignation, walks into the computer teacher's office straight through a doorway behind us and slams the printout down on his desk. "Scott," he accosts his fellow faculty member, "can computers really make value judgments?" F. Scott Burnham was a man of few words. He strokes his beard, carefully suppressing any trace of a smile, and hands the printout back to Goodfellow. "Finch, if the computer says it's true, it must be true." With that, Goodfellow retreats in a dramatic huff. In retrospect, I wonder, a bit of Dream Society kabuki? As a kid, my personal hero from Edith Hamilton's mythology was wily Odysseus. Wiliness outfoxed brute strength every time. It was pretty damned embarrassing that Red beat the pants off me whenever we arm wrestled. My high school pals thought it was a riot, so I was up for a good trick at her expense. Our mom thought there was no way Red should get behind the wheel of a car, let alone a brand spanking new Firebird. Pop's logic was that Red was born 36 seconds before me, so she deserved the first crack at the vehicle. Obviously a flawed argument, but Pop had a soft spot for Red. So Mom counseled me as to how that was not going to happen, and that the keys were rightfully mine. I kind of followed the logic, but I think the gist of it was she thought Red would get herself killed, and I was the more trustworthy of the two of us. If she only knew. It was the last day of Red's month-long forced march along the path of the righteous. Pop had sent Red to bike over to the Chinese place up the pike and pick up an order of his favorite chop suey. Meanwhile, Mom tore like hell over there, picked up the chop suey, raced it home, and handed it to me in a nice, made-in-Japan bowl with Pop's personal plastic chopsticks. Suburban, middle-class chic. I was to tell Pop that Red had to run off to track practice, but asked me to bring his grub to him and nab the keys for a joyride together later. And I was to wax eloquent about what a miracle it was that Red had kept her shit together for a whole month. As I was doing just that, I hear Red pull up on her old tank of a bike and burst through the front door, only to be told by an ersatz sorrowing mom, "Oh, sweetheart, it looks like Jakey beat you to the punch. He already gave your father the chop suey, and he's got the keys to the Firebird." Red looks up the stairs and sees me with the keys dangling from my hand, and, intemperate as ever, takes the chop suey she humped all the way home, lets out a blood-curdling holler, and heaves the grub right at Grandma Isakson's love seat, the one and only heirloom in the house, now splattered with noodles and brown sauce. Mom had bet on just this reaction. Pop shambles to the top of the stairs just in time to see Red's performance, blind to the shenanigans we've pulled. He bellows down to her, "Damn you, Red. One last day and you couldn't do it? Now you clean up that mess and apologize to your mother." At this point, Red's face is about the same color as her hair. She screams at the top of her lungs, "Fuck you all!" Storms out of the house, slams the door so hard it knocks Grandma's picture off the wall. A bat out of hell, she lit out on her bike for parts unknown. Poor Pop, so confused. He mutters, "This feels like another of Red's catastrophes, but it's got your damn clever fingerprints all over it." I just stay quiet. I still feel kind of bad about it. Seemed like all the air went out of the old man as he shrugged and concluded, "Well, you got what you wanted. Take the keys and go on. Just don't get yourself killed." Not exactly a blessing, but I took whatever Pop had to give. I'm pretty sure that was it, the karmic hoo-ha that sent me to the Ghost Palace, the setup for picking up my ectoplasmic hitchhiker. The habits of rule-bending, late-night wandering, the inhaling of pungent weed, and the consumption of intoxicating elixirs all set the stage for a ghost world transit. There I was, thoroughly ensconced in the shadowy world of the Ghost Palace when it turns bad on me in a big way. It was early in the evening, God knows what day of the week, as they all blended together. A group of us had squeezed into the closet that passed for a bedroom of one of our confreres to spin some tunes on the record player, that recently resurrected antiquarian device, whilst partaking of the demon weed. I perched on the edge of the cot that served as a bed next to my new best buddy, Todd. He had just quit tobacco, but had no problem indulging in more than a little Mary Jane. Out of sheer perversity, Mustache Man had made a bet with Todd that he couldn't stay quit for more than 48 hours. It was coming up on the end of that interval, and Todd was sitting pretty. Mustache Man nowhere in sight. So we cranked up the tunes and passed joint after joint after joint. One of the other guys lights up a cigarette and makes like he's waxing eloquent about its savor. "Like fields of wheat waving in the wind, like fresh grapes engorged with juice dangling from the vine." I could taste those goddamn grapes, see those waving wheat stalks. Even though I had never smoked a cigarette in my damn life, my mind filled with shining, juicy apples stuffed into rolled-up cigarette paper. Todd turned to the poet of Marlborough, extended a hand, brought the burning fag to his mouth, and inhaled with a deep, satisfied sigh. Suddenly, a loud "Gotcha!" from right outside the window. Mustache Man. It was a setup, and Todd was busted. I felt the echo of the shockwave that passed through Todd. Total bummer. Mustache Man was fast among us as he snatched his $5 bill from my bamboozled pal. I stood up unsteadily from my perch to pass the joint to a guy on the other side of the room. My mother's face, or her voice, calls me, or me her. No direction, no knowing. I go down for the count. As I come to, the owner of the record player barks out a harsh, "What the fuck, man?" Seems I had collapsed into his music box, and he's none too happy. I slump back down on the cot, shaken and disoriented. I had never lost consciousness before, and I'm kind of freaked out about it. But no one takes notice. I suddenly realize what should have been self-evident all summer. Not a single one of these scurrilous characters, not even my buddy Todd, gives a shit about me. Not one God-forsaken shit. The entire universe frame shifts ever so slightly. This was it, the inflection point. The game had changed irreversibly. My joyride tipped, ever so slightly, into descent. I think it was on the fourth pass I let myself realize I was crossing that bridge or highway entrance or whatever it was without paying the toll. Each time I saw the sign cueing me as to my recent or impending infraction, I dismissed the thought, as driving was the thing. Finally, I woke up, took the exit ramp from Dreamtime, and shambled into Materia Mundi. No more tolls, thank you very much. Just walk and water the beast. My limping and scratchy frame, frickin' 4 a.m. of all the inconvenient. 1 hour past the usual arousal time for cortisol, breakfast of zombies. Technos timestamps us, the border patrol that filters immigration from the kingdom of Morpheus. Emerging midst tubes and wires and bolsters and mountains of fabric, there is no doubt whose realm this is. Technos, rebellious servant of Morpheus, has established its own turf, a sui generis raison d'etre macaronic to the core. Technical language, so it is, claims ownership over every bit of real estate by the simple changing of names, no rhyme or reason necessary. Though a bit of poetry here and there helps the medicine go down, the wholly owned chemical subsidiary of Technos Industries. There are remedies. Madame Rosamunda, a fellow traveler in Morpheus's realm, tells me that her lover has contrived a fix for the seductions of Technos. Midnight's lockbox. It turns the monster upon itself, clasped by the low-tech fix. Tiny minions of Technos constrain more sophisticated cousins from invading Morpheus's realm. A small victory, but noteworthy. I will share with other sufferers. I know that Morpheus will not long be detained. The clarion call of creation's thunder. Balance shall be restored, but at what cost? The immediate plan, trade mobility for relief from pain, allow the installation of machine parts into my frame, the buying of time in a dark market. Another remedy, mentioned in passing by a colleague who sings the body electric, an aerial escape, either by helicopter or a circling of songbirds, two sides of the Technos coin. Desires aim, flesh that sings. How do we choose what we choose to choose, and how do we know it's we who do the choosing? The notion of free will was already a dubious proposition by the end of an entire summer in the Ghost Palace. Drifting on tides of an invisible sea, no sense of speed as I hurtled away from my point of origin, I found myself stranded on the shores of my family's suburban driveway in animated discourse with two of my childhood stoner pals. I'd known Loki and Snakeholder since we were 6, but the tropes of our friendships were markedly reshaped in high school due to the peregrinations of Snakeholder's family and mine. My family had moved just across the invisible dividing line between one junior high catchment and the next. The point of separation from an older community of modest split levels inhabited by a mixed multitude, allowing for intermingling and the inevitable points of friction. One time, this older kid with whom a friend and I sat in our makeshift tree fort mocked my alien origins. "So you're a tribe head. You must eat that tribal cream." I had no idea what the young tribe baiter was talking about, but I left sensing it might get uglier. My mother called Mrs. Scylla, the Cub Scout den mother whose backyard I'd been in. Mrs. Scylla called the other boy's mother Mrs. Charybdis, and it never happened again. That was it, the sole instance of anti-tribe bullying in my vast childhood experience. Still, my mother felt impelled to have us move, straight across Butler Pike into the arms of Harry Kravitz. Harry Kravitz was a shyster responsible for the clot of shiny 2-story 4-bedroom castles available to members of the tribe, MOTs, as my parents would say, unlike other neighborhoods in the county with restrictive covenants, no tribe heads allowed. Water in the basements, cheap-ass walls. The exciting bonus, lightning strikes up and down our street that backed onto the woods, as per my father's requirements. The woods, not the lightning. Just down the street, a contractor's house was hit 3 times. Snakeholder's family, on the other hand, traversed an exotic path overseas and back on account of his dad's academic sabbaticals. I was both entranced and mystified by Snakeholder's family. They actually seemed to like each other and were inclined to speed-of-light conversations over the dinner table, verbal ping-pong. Loki was different. Hard-bitten loner and mathematical genius. Both Snakeholder and I knew firsthand what it was like to be bulldozed by Loki into doing things we'd prefer to have forgotten we'd done. He'd laid claim to a significant number of firsts in our circle. First acid trip, first lay, first and only to play chess with Mr. Goodfellow, right in the asshole's home. Yes, Goodfellow of Computer Lab Conquest. Turns out he was gay, who knew? But Loki had no trouble making it clear he was only there for the chess. Loki was hard to pigeonhole. It was with Loki that I trudged, high on weed for the first time, to and from the vast and mysterious silt basin in the woods behind my house. A wide plain of basaltic sand, surrounded by a ring of stunted thorn trees. It was a surreal wonder. Hand over hand, we climbed the sawed-off iron rungs that pierced the side of the concrete monolith, the defunct pumping station that dominated the apocalyptic vista. Stoned at its verge, fear and awe struck in equal measure. That was what it meant to be a friend of Loki. The three of us loitered, half in the street and half in my driveway, and circled in on the prey, the wild Mary Jane. Thumbs up, Holmes. The A-OK gesture. Pinch the medial side of the tip of the thumb, convey the message that we are of one mind, or zero mind, and are about to embark on our joint enterprise, the Ghost Pact. The next rung on Sunsamau's ladder of doom after the Ghost Palace. And what an enterprise it was. Initiation into the priesthood of dealers in the alteration of consciousness. I hear the drums and bells announce the yawning wide of a gargantuan metal gate to an ancient city whose byways and plazas held all forms of fascination and sorrow. Fascination, from the Latin fascinare, to cast the evil eye. Our words quickened with inevitability. Snakeholder, let's get a dime. Me, how about an ounce? Snakeholder, with mounting glee, 2 ounces. Loki, a pound. A stunned silence. Then all three with great solemnity, 2 pounds. The next school year, a year of going nowhere fast. Of course, the dope would be stored at my house after Loki scored it. My house because my mother was so checked out that she'd neither notice nor ask any questions. What I didn't realize until much later was that my mother, she who binds things together, and I, twisted one son of he who laughs, were sliding in tandem into a psychic abyss, the great sucking sound of the vacuum left by my father, banished from the scene. Ad libitum. A weird thing happened to my family home earlier that same summer whilst I was cavorting at the Ghost Palace. Best as I could piece together, as my mother was a bit stingy and dilatory in the revelation of details, a huge lightning ball slammed right into the side of our house. A swirl of light and darkness and tremendous momentum. The next-door neighbors, Mrs. Lovechild and her strange daughter, Bunny, were walking up the stairs to their second-floor landing when they witnessed a large fiery spheroid sailing from left to right down the hall, one side of the house to the other, until it vanished through the outside wall nearest our house. Perhaps it had lost just the right amount of momentum. Or maybe a cosmic bowling demon had taken precise aim at our abode. Conceivably, it completed a monstrous electrical circuit set in motion at the beginning of time. Space and time collapsed. The bowling ball of the apocalypse crashed full force into the chimney, translating all of its dielectric and mechanical mojo into a discharge that knocked the bricks out of the chimney, broke every window in the house, and totally fried all of the electrical wiring. It was the extent of the physical damage that my mother chose to conceal for God knows what reason. At the time of impact, my mother was on her daily phone chat with her mother, the one who is in charge. It was a frightening crack, and the line went dead, except for a continuous ringing and hissing sound, she told me. Turns out that the hissing sound was all in her head, her ear to be precise, due to a permanent contracture of her supercharged stapedius muscle, cranking back on the miniature stapes bone, thus increasing the tension on the drumhead of her tympanic membranes, thereby registering every minute sound in excruciating amplification. Imagine the pulsing of the blood, the movement of the air, the twitching of hairs in the auditory meatus, all transmitted in a monstrous theater of rasping animalia. A cacophony of sound, muffled voices, my mother's face or her voice, calling me or me calling her, no direction, no knowing. Remember? Tinnitus, tintinnabulation, the ringing of tiny bells. No doubt, the announcement for that gargantuan gate, yawning wide to greet us in our twin descent into the psychic maelstrom, me in the ghost palace and my mother at the family hearth. It's just a hunch, can't prove it, but feels more true than not. I had no sympathy for she who binds back then. She'd already ghosted me. The way I looked at it, my every sullen teenage snarl and growl was intended to wake her from her post-divorce torpor. One in charge didn't see it that way. No one had yet seen fit to enlighten me as to my mother Becky's childhood trauma. Seems generation after generation of women had been put through that ringer and learned to keep it to themselves. My mother handed me the phone in the middle of one of their chats. As I made to listen, a harsh voice bent my ear. "Your mother should have divorced you, too." I handed the phone back to my mother and left the building, permanently. The breach with grandmother was unfortunately never mended. The perpetuation of secrets and trauma down the generational ladder, a pattern old as truth himself. My mother was sinking fast, and I couldn't see it as anything other than her refusal to man her post. Cruel and strange, as my empathy for all of my other fellow beings on the planet was slowly expanding over the course of that same year to the point of heat death. No distinctions. The only constant, the axis around which all else revolved, was weed. Those 2 pounds of pot fueled week after week of low-octane adventures. My high school chums found it more than a tad annoying that I had developed the reflex to object and offer alternative views of the objects of our favorite pastime, the mockery of everyone and everything, all expenses paid in full by others. Others meaning anybody who wasn't us. The weird girl in the advanced math class, only child of superannuated parents who wore clothes straight out of Little House on the Prairie. The obnoxious conservative Jewish kid whose parents voted for Nixon. The long-haired oddball who spoke in a hoarse rumble, rarely made eye contact, and could be seen picking up and sniffing used Kleenexes on the soccer field. I imagined a rationale for each of their modes of being, what Virgil called my relativity theorem. But it did not apply to my mother, not to either of my wounded progenitors, and not either, as a matter of fact, to Finchley Goodfellow. It was a dark year. My mother spent the bulk of her waking hours at home, in bed, reading, or in the bathtub. When the dope arrived, I stashed it in the wall of my closet behind the access panel to the plumbing for the bathtub. The bathtub where my mother floated in forced serenity most evenings, just inches from the hiding place of our manifestly illegal 2-pound stash of Mary Jane. A missed opportunity for irony, different juice for inducing psychic buoyancy. In those years, possession of even an iota of pot was a felony, rendering the possessor eligible for serious jail time and ruined prospects for future employment, President Nixon's war on drugs. We were most definitely on the wrong side of the law, though I can't say the fact of it made any serious impression on me. Loki, Snakeholder, and I split the cash outlay for the dope exactly 3 ways. Whatever we might feel inclined to sell individually was ours to keep. By the end of that year, Snakeholder turned a profit, I broke even, and Loki's cash all went up in smoke. Random high school acquaintances came knocking at the front door of my house. If she who binds answered, she called to me wherever I was skulking, "Jakey, Warren Harding is here." I trundled down the steps with a joint cupped in one hand and a nickel or dime bag shoved in my pocket. At the bottom of the steps, I throw on my army jacket and shamble out the door. "Hey, man, what's up?" I'd mumble, knowing exactly what was up. "I hear you've got some shit," or some other straight-to-the-point reply would follow. We'd make a beeline for the empty two-car garage, close the electric door behind us, and light up the J. No words were exchanged as we silently passed the burning weed back and forth the requisite number of tokes for the customer to ascertain the potency of said herb. A further exchange of smiles and nods, a plasticine bag, and small bills, and the deal was done. Portcullis up, customer splits, Celentine returns to his castle keep, clueless Mom apparently none the wiser. "What did Warren want, dear?" she'd inquire tentatively from the bottom of the stairs. "He had some math questions," I'd lie absurdly. No further inquiry on cross-examination. Case continued. The days spun into a slow spiral of dissolution, one week tumbling into the next. No plan, no clear future in sight. Few core activities remained intact. Time to time, I'd stay home sick and spend hours banging out the handful of Beatles songs, blues riffs, and tunes from the radio I could figure out on the family piano, my Pop Izzy's piano. I never seemed to have homework. I made it to drama club rehearsals and had enough neurons firing to memorize my lines for the evening productions. Amazes me to think of it now. My junior high poker buddy Junta made its way to high school and continued to gather for weekly games of poker and self-edification. The venue shifted from Jamie Christ's well-appointed suburban man cave, complete with mounted deer head and hooves, to my kitchen table. The primary draw, ready access to beer and no adult supervision. My mother's idea for keeping Red close to home. Red had already been busted once for sitting out on the pike with Loki, a six-pack out there in plain sight between the two of them. They were meant for each other, though as far as I know it, there was never anything romantic. Especially after he cut and ran, left her holding the bag. An officer of the law dressed in a powder blue blazer with handcuffs dangling from the back of his belt showed up at our house to have a talk with she who binds. "Ma'am, your young lady here was lucky. This is just a citation, but the path from here is up to her. If she gets caught drinking underage again, the penalties will certainly be harsher." Mom looked at Red. Red stared at her feet. "Did you hear what the officer said, dear?" Red didn't look up, but muttered acknowledgment. The officer, having said his piece, bid my mother adieu. The obvious solution? Stock the fridge with beer so the little deviant didn't have to go beyond her front door to catch a buzz. We poker buddies played on, beneficiaries of my mother's largesse. In honor of Red, of course. Speaking of suburban man caves, Jamie Christ was a hunter, a fact that we, his more tame suburban cronies, found at once baffling, horrifying, and yet somehow hilariously absurd. It all spilled into the open one pot-fueled night in the woods. There were 5 of us, looking for a secluded place to get high. Crunching down a dirt trail just out of earshot of my good friend Virgil's old Blueberry Hill neighborhood, we toked up, in silence at first. There we were, all standing and passing the joint, shifting back and forth on our feet to keep warm in the crisp autumnal air. Someone remembered, apropos of nothing, "So, Jamie, you shot a deer." "Yep," he grinned. No one in our crowd had felt moved to congratulate the young savage on his kill the time he first told us, and if the impulse had arisen that night in the woods, it was most certainly strangled in his sleep. Silence. Someone else, possibly me, proffered in the voice of Smokey the Bear, "You killed Bambi." Suppressed giggles. The platonic form of irony, or the mythic memory of Actaeon's hubris and Artemis's revenge, insidiously descended upon our stone crew, loyal hounds at the ready. All of us but Jamie drew back, holding invisible, loaded hunting rifles, and took aim at our Bambi-killing friend. A slow-motion firing squad. Kapow! And Jamie, not a beat out of sync, sprouted antlers and sunk to the forest floor, the death throes of the fatally wounded prey. No applause or calls for encore, just quiet awe in the face of the energetic form that briefly possessed us and let us go, to meander home and toke another night. Looking back, the weird that descended upon us that night might have set up the false dichotomy between the erstwhile Apollonian ethos of my wasp amigo and the Dionysian course I was setting. I had set myself up as the standard-bearer of the stochastic avatar of anarchy. I had set myself up for a fall, death by 1,000 stumbles. One of those stumbles was at my kitchen table one dark and stormy night. My mother was out on a date with her alcoholic paramour, a well-meaning southerner. Jephthah kept my mother busy most nights when she wasn't drowning her sorrows in the bathtub. Problem was, Jephthah was long separated from a wife who wouldn't grant him a divorce. Both his kids were sacrificed on that altar as well. That bit of information had been hidden from my sister and me. Until that night. It was a steady rain that just wouldn't let up. There were 6 of us at the kitchen table, armed with nothing more than beer, pretzels, 2 decks of cards, and a set of poker chips. The hands were dealt with the usual bravado, cash on the barrel, no limits on raises. The no limits part was the mistake we persisted in making for unclear reasons. Nobody really plays that way, no limits on raising, especially when you're in high school and money comes in small bills. But we were monsters of poker. A couple of shuffles, Jamie dealt first, handed the cards to Cab for the cut. He squinted meaningfully at each of the players, and then at our chips in the middle of the table and declared, "Pot's right." He let fly the cards at each of his chums in turn. 5-card stud, progressive, roll your own. Jacks are better to enter, trips to win. He intoned with the solemnity of a carnival barker, a stock market arbitrageur, a barnyard auctioneer, or, more likely, a Sunday preacher announcing the transgressions du jour and the assigned penitents. This particular game was a long slog, as the wait for someone to pull 3 of a kind could be interminable, but the pot grew along with the value of the hand required for entry with each seductive round of failure to meet the rising demand, hence progressive. I can feel my heart rate jump a beat even now as I remember the challenge of bluffing someone out of their trip 7s, 3 of a kind, with my trash hand. Trash, meaning 5 cards held in my hand, were utterly unrelated to one another, no pattern, no value. Stochastic. My buddies were wary of me as I had discovered the stratagem of betting wildly and unpredictably, regardless of what I held in my hands. Up to this point, a winning gambit. Jamie. Isakson, you got your jacks? Me. I got jack shit. And so on clockwise around the table until either one lucky sucker had the opener or we all tossed in our hands, anteed again, and resumed the sacrificial ritual with a higher bar for each round of entry. Virgil to Jamie. Junior, can you at least try to put some queens toward the top of the deck? Jamie. Sure, Virgie. Queens in your hole it is. Mirthful guffaws at the well-worn poker double entendres. Suddenly, I hear Red's voice from the hall by the front door. Jakey, you gotta come see this. There was a hint of urgency in her voice, so I folded my hand, pushed my chair back from the table, and went to see what the fuss was about at the door. A crazed woman with a porcine face and curlers and a bathrobe stood there in the rain, screaming something incoherent at my sister. I stepped outside and latched the door, essayed to discern who the hell she was and what in hell she wanted. In her broad, intoxicated southern drawl, she declaimed for all the neighborhood to hear, "Your mama is a shameless hussy. She's out there somewhere tonight stealing my Jephthah." So now I knew. Red and I both. We looked at each other and shrugged a silent, so the fuck what? I turned to the banshee howling at our threshold and said as firmly and forcefully as I could muster, "Lady, if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the cops." The last thing I actually wanted to do right then, with a house full of underage drinkers, but I knew the bluff was good. Miraculously, the wife of Jephthah turned around and disappeared. I returned to the poker table, and Redbent went back to whatever she was doing, which I never knew and never cared to know. Not sure what I told the fellows, something about a fricking messenger at the door, wrong address, no further questions asked, the code of silence. Never ask a man what he does not appear to want to answer, no matter what. Pretty much what fucked up Percival when he was searching for the Grail. He should have asked the lame king why he was writhing in agony at Percival's welcoming party at the Grail Castle. If only he had asked, the curse on the castle would have lifted, fertility returned to the land, and Percival would have gotten his hot little hands on the Grail right then and there. But he'd been schooled by the master, Sir fucking K the fucking Seneschal. A knight asks no unnecessary questions. So Percival's journey to the Grail was much prolonged. Only later did Percival realize the meaning of the messenger's curse. The fucking messenger, porcine face as grotesque as his soul. Meanwhile, back at the poker table, I returned to my habitual strategy of making random, absurdly high bets to scare off the other folks who were still in the game. Only this time it didn't work. If I had watched the Jane Goodall film of the runt chimp banging the empty gas can at his bigger mates, I would have known that the gambit had an expiration date. That date was now. I held my cards up to my nose and peeked slyly over the edge, pulled a $20 bill out of my wallet, plunked it right on top of the pile of chips in the middle of the table. 20 smackers to play, gentlemen. You could have heard a pin drop. The only sound was the sub-vocalized group sigh as they all folded. All except Dante. Dante, slow and even, mouthed the words which left his lips and closed in a viscous bubble. All right, Isakson. I'll see your 20. I think you're bluffing. Show us what you got. I felt the earth spin, the clouds scud, and heard the distant moan of an unidentified nocturnal creature. I looked at Dante. Everyone else was staring straight at me. Dante had opened the betting on the third round, so he had started with at least a pair of kings. If he was calling me, he must have had trips and didn't want me to get away with my shit. I knew Dante and was pretty sure he wouldn't toss away 20 bills just to make a point. I was screwed. Screwed out of the not insignificant sum of $20 plus 3 rounds of anteing up. My cards fell from my fingers, revealing my truly sad and lonely king. Dante placed his cards on the table one at a time with a look of carefully measured satisfaction, one eyebrow raised ever so slightly, lips pursed as he simply said, I guess my 3 guys beats your 1. As Dante raked in the hall, Jamie Christ suddenly springs from his chair, hops up and down like a mad leprechaun, poking the air with his wand. You deserve that, Isakson! You so fucking deserve that! To which my immediate and full-throated reply was, Fuck you, Christ! Fuck you! We may have played a few more hands, or we may have called it quits. Don't remember. But that, as they say, was the end of that. My random walk through life was ill-serving me, and I had no idea just how badly it could really go. The worst was yet to come. But I still hadn't got the message, no matter how loudly it was delivered, right to my frickin' door.